Are you intensely depressed because you missed formative years of your high school experience due to the Great Plague? Well, have I got the game for you. It's called Persona 3 Portable. You play as a high school student who must balance their studies and friendships while trying to destroy God using enslaved mythical Judeo-Christian symbols. And you have to do all of it while being in 2006. Now, the game being called Persona 3 Portable implies that there is a version which is not portable. In fact, there are multiple: Persona 3, Persona 3 FES, and Persona 3 Reload. Persona 3 FES is basically an enhanced version of the base Persona 3. It includes new Pokemon, it includes new mythical religious figures to recruit, as well as a bunch of tweaks spread out across the entire game. However, the big change is that there is a whole new epilogue added called The Answer, which is basically a whole new episode with tens of hours of gameplay. Now that probably sounds awesome, but it's also kind of sort of not as good as the base game, but it's still cool that it exists. On the other hand, Persona 3 Portable is a version of the game made for the PlayStation. But if it was portable, this version has the base Persona 3 story with a whole host of new changes that were not in FES. One big change is that you can actually control your party members during combat. In the other versions, they would be controlled by AI, which honestly wasn't that big of a deal. But it could definitely lead to some authentic press-turn system moments. However, the biggest addition is that there is an entirely new route through the main game, where you get to play as a female protagonist. This changes some of the characters you get to meet and befriend. A lot of the base game social links have been rewritten as a result, and some new ones have been written in. It's really cool. Even a lot of the small dialogue throughout the game has been changed beyond just simple pronoun changes. For example, they have added revolutionary gossip with Yukari technology. Now this might sound like the best version of Persona 3 so far. Sure, you don't get the epilogue, but you get basically a whole new version of the base game. However, there is a dark twist. Everything outside of the combat has been turned into a visual novel. You no longer get to explore Tatsumi Port Island in all of its three-dimensional glory. I'm not gonna lie, it's really disappointing. You still get to look around with the point-and-click interface, which even lets you talk to NPCs, but needless to say, it hits different. However, you do get used to it, and honestly, it stopped bothering me quite quickly. The main takeaway though is that because of this, there is no definitive version of Persona 3. FES and Portable are both better or worse than each other in different ways, so if you want the complete Persona 3 experience, you would have to play both. However, this all changed.
I'm not free, but I kept trying. Not strong enough, but I kept going. With all the hardship away, knowing that if I don't fight, I'll forever be more with pain.
That's right, they're remaking it. Finally, we are going to have all the features of FES and Portable in one amazing package. Well, that was a nice dream while it lasted. This means that the remake is going to be the definitive way to play the male protagonist route going forward, which means that if you ever play Persona 3 Portable, there is no reason to play as the male protagonist, because you will experience that whenever you play the remake, so you have no choice but to play as the female protagonist. So buckle up, you're a woman now. The game is split into two parts, the daily life segments and the dungeon delving. Most of the story occurs during these daily life segments. You are given an entire school year, and every day you get to decide what you do or who you hang out with. As the year goes on, you will be able to access new activities and characters. There will be quizzes during classes that you can answer using your bottomless intellect. You also get to explore a few small areas filled with NPCs and shops. Most days you will pick between doing an activity to increase your social skills while maybe making some money, or hanging out with one of the kooky and colorful characters, such as this silly fella who is dying of an incurable disease, or this nice young lady whose life has been completely derailed due to endless abuse. All in all, it's a happy time. The second part of the game is the dungeon delving. It turns out there is a secret hour after midnight, where shadows rise up and roam the earth. Now this is basically sleep paralysis, but the difference is that you can move around, and it's anime. Naturally, during this period of time, your school turns into a giant tower called Tartarus, and you've got to climb it to get stronger, in order to defeat bosses that appear on full moons, kind of like studying at school to pass exams. that appear on full moons. Atlas really cooked here with this parallel. For the most part, navigating Tartarus is incredibly repetitive. After every single random encounter, you get hit with that Gekukan stare. It's just randomly generated hallways with the occasional room that has a ramp in the corner. I have no idea why they chose to have these ramp rooms. It's not like they lead to an elevated room or anything. They could have gone with any other style of room, but they chose this bizarre ramp thing. Persona 3 came out in 2006. Maybe people were just really into ramps back then. They also have these stairs that go absolutely nowhere. Even though Tartarus is really repetitive, it's still quite fun. This is mostly because it has the excellent combat and encounter design of the Shin Megami Tensei games. Each zone of Tartarus will have unique sets of encounters, which you slowly become more familiar with until you can easily defeat them. The combat system requires you to take advantage of enemy weaknesses. For example, one of the enemy types you face is literally a table. To be fair, it's a very threatening table, and just like tables in real life, it is weak to ice. When you hit the weakness of an enemy, you get an extra turn, and if you manage to hit every enemy with their weakness, you can trigger an all-out attack which will deal a lot of damage. What's great about this combat system is that the same applies to you. The enemies can get extra turns if they hit your weaknesses.
Three enemies present. Don't get careless. Hey, are you all right? Single strike. Come on, get up.
So you will routinely have to change your builds to give you certain resistances, while letting you take advantage of certain weaknesses. It's great. The dungeon delving progresses in tandem with the daily life. Each part of it is effectively locked behind a boss fight that occurs on each full moon. And certain things in the real world will affect your capabilities in Tartarus. Social links will let you make stronger personas. The pharmacy will sell you probably legal healing items, and a police officer will sell you weaponry, even though you are a high school student. And the thing is, these are actually real weapons. It's not like Persona 5, where those corny, goofy Phantom Thieves buy model weapons and transform them into real weapons through the imagination of John Krasinski. You are just straight up buying swords from him, which I assume he is stealing from the evidence locker. Needless to say, the specialized extracurricular execution squad is simply built different. The female protagonist's route has a large amount of new social links along with changes to existing ones, especially one really interesting addition. It definitely feels like a different game. The first big change you are likely to meet is Theodore. Igor asks you what the gender of his servant is. I think this is because he literally has no object permanence. If you say female, you get Elizabeth from the male route, but if you say male, you get access to Theodore, who is exclusive to the female route. He doesn't have his own social link, but you frequently get side missions to take him out around the world, where he approaches human culture much like an alien would. Theodore is also responsible for helping you fuse personas, buy persona-related accessories, and so on, all while Igor sits there and hits you with that blue velvet stare. That's pretty much all Igor does for the majority of the game. There is nothing behind his eyes. He is not an intelligent life form. Speaking of unintelligent life forms,
Yo, Yucatan. This is a tough case, even for Junpei Iori, ace detective.
Ace detective? Are you stupid or something? More like Stupe, ace defective.
Junpei is one of the new social links. His characterization in the base game is basically a stupid guy who really likes women, but with a heart of gold. His social link fleshes him out a lot more. Basically, someone starts taking photos of you, so he uses his ace detective skills to put a stop to it. It's surprisingly heartfelt, and makes his character a lot more than just a comic relief. However, looking at the Wikipedia page for his voice actor kind of completely undermines it. So, moving on. on. Saori is a completely new character exclusive to the female route. This is probably the most intense social link in the game. Depending on a choice, you either meet her as part of the library or health committee. She is an older student that missed some years of schooling. All of the other students take advantage of her, and she is completely passive to this. It's honestly kind of frustrating at first. Eventually a boy asks her out, but he is already dating someone, so that predictably ruins her reputation, despite her being unaware of his relationship. Then a journalist lies about her for some reason. What is the thought process behind that? Some grown man just sees a high school student and suddenly decides that she is now his primary op. This results in her suspension from school. Eventually she comes back, and in a triumphant moment, you convince her to tell the truth over the school PA system. The other teachers back her up, and everything is fixed. She ends up moving to a different school, but this time she has a much stronger sense of self, so it's a happy ending, right? Well, this is where it gets really weird. Early in her social link, she implies that there is someone she likes romantically, but that it will never work out. Then right at the end of the social link, she drops the bomb on you that it's actually her uncle. Suddenly this explains her previous behavior, and why she left school for a period of time. But it gets even worse. At the end of the game she sends you a letter, where she reveals that she survived a pact between her and her uncle, while he didn't, and that her parents blame her for this. It completely recontextualizes her entire character story, and as a result it becomes this really compelling picture of a victim from an exterior point of view. Suddenly her completely passive behavior makes sense. Her inability to stand up for herself makes sense, because she was never able to form an idea of her own self-identity. We don't actually get to find out if she gets any true happy ending. Our life just briefly intersects with hers. It's this really sobering moment that I think a lot of people probably missed. Ryo Iwasaki really likes tennis. She can also like volleyball, because you meet her by choosing to join either the tennis team or the volleyball team. And your choice retroactively rewrites her entire life up until that point, in order to make her the captain of the team you chose. I chose the tennis team because tennis is postmodern apparently, and that kind of fits with how you rewrite her entire life. This complete subversion of her own individual will might sound kind of messed up, but she's having fun, so no harm done. Ryo Iwasaki has always liked tennis, however she has a problem. Her teammates don't like her because she takes it way too seriously. They all end up quitting, which might sound sad, but it gives us one-on-one time with Ryo, so we can network and get stronger personas. This is the only reason to ever make friends. It turns out she has a crush on her childhood friend Kenji. Kenji is a social link from the male route. His entire personality is that he likes older women, teachers specifically. Yes, Atlas have done it again. They have dropped yet another weird social link. Eventually the team comes back to Ryo and they apologize to each other. Now that everyone is friends again, they try to get her to go out with Kenji. However, disaster strikes, because Kenji is incredibly weird. And then the social link ends with Ryo having a newfound self-respect. I'm beginning to sense a pattern here. It seems pretty much every single social link ends with them having a newfound self-respect, which is especially ironic here, seeing that we completely obliterated her identity when we rewrote her entire history, just so that she would play tennis with us. Now we can't talk about complete obliteration of identity without talking about Ryoji. Ryoji is not a real person. He is literally death. His job is basically to bring about the end of the world, but the identity of Ryoji is completely separate from his identity as Death. When you first meet him, he has no memories of his time as Death. So for all purposes, he is literally just some guy, and in the female route you get him as a social link. Ryoji spends the social link fascinated with you, because he feels like he knows you from somewhere. This is because the creepy demon child that would occasionally wake you up in the middle of the night is actually an alternate form of him. So basically your sleep paralysis demon was young Sheldon, and now your awake paralysis demon is just Sheldon. Young Sheldon was sealed within you 10 years ago in an accident accident that killed your parents. Again, this is all normal high school drama that we can relate to. As a result of your actions throughout the game, young Sheldon is released from inside of you and takes the form of Ryoji. Through his social link, you get to know him a lot better than you do in the base game, and you can even romance him, which adds a very interesting emotional dynamic to the main story of the game. You get this very heartfelt narrative with this fake human being whose destiny is death and who you are fated to battle in order to save humanity. Ryoji isn't the only character you can form a relationship with. You also get Akihiko. His social link is basically just a standard issue social link. It fleshes him out a lot more and also integrates with revelations in the main storyline. On the other hand, you can also romance Ken. Yeah, I don't know what Atlas was on with this one. They'll have a fairly intense and challenging narrative like Saori's, and then within the same game completely undermine it by having something like the Ken social link. You literally initiate the social link by maxing out your courage stat, so you can force the timid Ken to hang out with you. It's just straight up bizarre and really uncomfortable. Shinjiro has a really interesting social link. You can choose to have a relationship with him like the other characters, but it works in an interesting way. In the base male route, Shinjiro only joins a team for a month before he gets as part of the story. There is no way to avoid this, and it becomes a big emotional moment for the other characters, where they gain a stronger resolve, and it provides a really big inflection point for the tone of the story. What if I told you that you could completely undermine this through the power of friendship? If you complete his social link before he dies, he mentions he lost his watch. If you go to the police officer who steals weapons from the evidence locker so he can sell them, he'll give it to you. You can now return it to Shinjiro, which saves his life. You see, when he would ordinarily get the watch actually stops a bullet and instead puts him into a coma. Yeah, that definitely makes sense. Being able to save a character like this isn't unprecedented. In FES, they added the ability to save another character who dies. Her name is Chidori, and all you had to do was talk to Junpei on certain days. Then she just magically comes back to life. That's literally what happens. When you look at the relationship between Shin Megami Tensei and Christianity, it's not too much of a stretch to say that Chidori is basically anime girl Jesus. Being able to save both of these characters is a fun change for returning players, but it also completely undermines the stakes of the narrative. It turns into a Saturday morning cartoon. However, I really don't care, because I enjoy saving my fake friends that I bonded with over the course of this extremely long video game. All of those social links pale in comparison to the most important change in Persona 3 Portable. You can now be best friends with man's best friend. Koromaru has his own social link. You can go on fun adventures such as fighting this guy's novelty USB, taking the dog to see a movie, and getting kicked out, illegally funneling weaponry in order to topple foreign regimes. All of this culminates in the most emotional scene in the game. Now, for the most part, those are the social links exclusive to the female route. Some of the existing ones are changed. For example, in Fuka's social link, you actually teach her how to cook, instead of just romancing her behind the back of your other girlfriends. Or in Maiko's, after you solve her family's conundrum, you get the option to romance her dad. There are quite a lot of small changes like that, which definitely make it worth replaying ones you may have already completed. One of the more interesting changes is that Aigis has a romance route for a female protagonist. This is one of the few instances of playable LGBT representation in the Persona franchise. In Persona 2, there was a similar situation with Jun. It's something that isn't really present in the modern games, so safe to say, the specialized extracurricular execution squad is simply built different. The calendar has also been changed around a bit. You do have more free time than the male route, which means it's actually a lot easier to 100% the social links on a blind playthrough. They also threw in a few new events. This remake actually came out after Persona 4, so they put in a school trip where you travel to the town where Persona 4 takes place, and you even get to meet Yukiko, as well as join an initiative. Persona 3 Portable is a fairly good remake-demake port thing. Yeah, it sucks you can't walk around and look at things, but the game having an entirely new route is really cool. It means this version of the game is still worth the time investment if you have already already played the original or the remake. That's also why I only talked about Portable's additions to the game in this video. I didn't really cover the original game storyline or all of its mechanics. This is because I will probably do a video on the remake that came out while I was making this video. So if you're interested in seeing that, and you enjoyed this video, you should subscribe to my channel. It would look great on your resume.